Welcome back to the McGolf shop. Jim McCleary, three-time Golf Digest Top 100 Club Fitter, International Club Maker of the Year. And now we're on to, we've got them all measured. They all frequencied out. And by the way, they only came out to 1/2 of 1 CPM, that's cycle per minute, from my target. So these things are going to be dead solid on. Now, what this is this. We're going to glue the heads together. Now, like I've said before, any trained monkey can glue them together, but of the repairs I've done in the past, if people have done themselves, they've forgotten some pretty crucial steps, like abrading the shaft or even cleaning out the hosel section. So, kind of show you what we're going to do. This is how you do it so you ensure yourself you have a good surface for bonding of the epoxy. And what you do for the first part of it is you get yourself a wire-ended brush. You can get these from most of the club making places, and just run it up, and you get it into a little drill, and you clean it out. Now, I don't know if you can see up into there, but it's a very, very clean hosel. Now, I've already done this to all of them. Knock it out a little bit, and we've done all that. Secondly is shaft prepping. Okay, what we're going to do is tip prep them. Remember when we drew the line on there? When we drew the line, that's the end of the hosel, and that's all the further we've got to tip the shaft. You turn that on. See how I'm rotating into the sandpaper, not letting it take it away? It makes a. What I'm looking to do is take off that little bit of chrome, and we're creating a rough surface for the epoxy to grab a hold of. That's what it needs to do. If it was smooth, it wouldn't grab. And that's some of the problems that we've seen out there is guys just glue it with the paint on it, if it was graphite, or the chrome in there, while on these steel tips, and they wonder why the stuff comes apart. All right. So we all have that together. Now, next is the epoxy. Now, there's a bunch of different ways of putting the epoxy together. I use a little piece of cardboard because we have plenty of shipping boxes. Hopefully you can see that. I'll put it right here. Like little 1-inch lines. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Get that extra off of there. And the epoxy is a 2-part epoxy, and it's a 50-50 epoxy, which means you need the same amount of hardener as you need of the glue itself. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now, people have fear wanting to be green and save a lot of space. You can get a plexiglass bottom, and when it dries you can just snap it off. I have not yet to have success with it, but other people have. I think it's a great idea, but it just hasn't worked for me, and I'm throwing this box away one way or another, so I figure I might as well just use it. And what I do is I use a little coffee stir stick. You could use a end of a screwdriver and make sure that you wipe it off when you're all done. You could use another shaft that you're never going to use again. Just whatever you like, whatever kind of tool you like. But all this right here is disposable. Now, why do you stir this up? Well, you got to mix them together, but you're also working the glue and the hardener together to get the exothermic reaction going and driving out all the air bubbles. Then what I do next is I put what's called quick center. Quick center is just basically some neat little glass bead. And I measure and I stir that in there with it, and what this does is it gets mixed up with the epoxy, and you take these little beads at their little bitty level. You're basically covering them with the epoxy, and it helps center the shaft into the hosel. Like I said before, all I'm trying to do is take out every little bit of inconsistency, and this just builds some consistency. Okay, that was tip 1. Tip 2 is, how do I prevent this, the ferrule, from creeping up the shaft after it's made and it's in somebody's bag? Because they will end up in cars and trunks that get very, very hot, in the backs of trucks that get very, very hot, especially when the tonneau covers on them. And these things are plastic and they tend to let go. Well, as you can see, I put a little bit of epoxy on the end and I shove it down through the shaft. And I have some just paper towels cut into about 2.5 inch squares. And I just don't want to get this all over me. Wipe that off again. Something hard to sit on. Get your hosel, push it over the top. And when you do that, you always wonder about, oh, but I push it. Well, that's the end of the hosel. That's the end of the club that you're going to use, so you've done a pretty good job. All right, you don't need to glob this thing on there with a lot of epoxy. In fact, this is probably too much, but see, I don't even have half the shaft covered. So I get in there. See, I'm spinning it. All right, and the idea is to get the epoxy nice and covered in a uniform fashion on there as well as in there. All right, so I just get a little bit more. Just get it nice and turned in there. I get my alignment marks lined up, and here's the whole reason for the hard thing on the bottom. I like setting the club. Does it do much? I think it does. I'm sure we could argue the point that it doesn't, but I like tapping it in there. It makes sure that it seats and it doesn't come out. Now, see how I'm wiping it around here? It's to remove all the black epoxy, so when it dries well. All right, tip number 3. This is a tip-packed adventure. All right, so we don't want this to creep up while it's gluing. Piece of tape. Make sure it's on the shaft. Make sure it's on the hosel, not so much on the ferrule. And there you go. Voila. So that's what we're doing. So we've abraded the tips. We've made sure the hosels are very clean. And we're putting a little bit of epoxy. We've stirred it well. Put our quick center in it. And now we're just putting them together. Now this is a 24-hour epoxy. And we'll talk epoxies here in another segment, but there's multiple kinds of epoxies for different kinds of applications. For just general club building use, I like the 24-hour epoxy because it has all the good characteristics for shear strength and its breaking points and its workability. So in 24 hours, this thing will be ready to rock and roll. Now there's ways to get around that, which we will discuss in another segment. All right, so we got that in there. Got it nice and clean. Tape it down. And get that on there. And we have another one on the rack. So I'm going to finish this up because you don't need it. You've seen it. Now you can just go and practice it and building on your own set. In review, a 1x42 belt sander at about 1800 RPM. Anything else, you're going to really eat up too much material. About a 120 or about 100 to 120 grit. You don't want it so rough that it doesn't want to go back in, and you don't want it so smooth it doesn't take anything off. Nice setup right here. Epoxy. Make sure you stir it for about 45 seconds and it runs the air bubbles out. Make sure to use the quick set. Also, when putting it together, tap it so you're seating it so that make sure you got a good firm fit when it goes together. When it's all said and done, mark your 24 hours and we'll be able to work it then. So I hope you learned a little something about putting together a club. It's not nearly as simple or as easy as it's portrayed to be. And if you do it right, the club will last for a long time. If you don't, you'll be seeing me anyway. So if you have any questions on this, send me an email at clubmaker@mcgolf.net. Ask it at the end of this video, and like this video or subscribe to the channel. And let's make sure those scores go low.